fingers down my spine? Girl, you look mighty fine. Won't you rub your fingers down my spine? Girl, you look mighty fine. Won't you rub your fingers down my spine?
All right, so this is Oman Adeki again. So in this section of the demo, we're going to pick off where we left off. So in the last demo, we created a customer. Now in this demo, we are going to show how a business owner will set up their SOPs for customer order request management. Let's say this is a mid-size distribution company, manufacturing distribution company. It can be any type of company, healthcare, but let's say it's a health distribution company, and then their business is taking in requests from their customers for parts and labor to meet needs of an organization. So what we do is we will define what we call an SOP for how we handle the customer requests. Now this is something that will be done with the consent of a business owner, and we'll work with them to understand the key processes. So this is going to be customized for different businesses, but you'll see how easy it is to set it up. So we'll call this customer workflow, customer orders workflow. Okay, and then you just specify it as a workflow. We'll call this a test manufacturer. There's no price associated. So when you want to set up a workflow, you define the SOP. One piece could be for the order process, another could be for fulfilling the request from inventory. If this request requires that you need to source the product from inventory, then we'll grab it from there. Another piece could be logistics. There could be requests to have to raise and assemble all the parts and labors, and we can define the workflows for that. Another one could be invoicing to send out the bill. Another could be collections to process the payments if there's any payments required. So you can set up different SOPs for the different stages of your business, right? Now this can be for traditional business, but this could also be used for an IT process, whereby these processes with respect to how you manage your systems, your assets, your identities, your cybersecurity policies and frameworks. That could be another use case. Whatever workflow that you have in mind, we'll capture and you load it into the system. So here we'll just define it real quick. So we've set it up and defined it, and then the next step is that you come into the system, and then this is the designer tool that tells you how to handle the workflow. So typically, when a customer comes in, you get the identity of the customer, identify the customer. That could be the first step, and then you source their request, their order request. And then the next step might be to check your inventory. This is just an example. Check check local inventory. And then your fourth step could be assemble inventory if you have it in stock. If in stock. But then if it's not in stock, you may have to requisition, purchase requirement. Okay, and then that'll be the next step if it's not in stock. If not in stock. So this will be a stage in the workflow, right? If you have an inventory, you assemble it. If you don't have it, you purchase it. Now this purchasing piece could actually kick off another workflow. For some organizations, purchasing a part is so complex. You need to get signatures, you need to get pricing, you need to get quotes, you need to get approvals. It can get really complicated. So we could potentially break up the purchasing piece into a different workflow that we call customer purchasing requisition, and you spell out all the steps in a separate workflow. But we're not going to go into that, but you can add that level of detail as required. So you get the inventory, and then the next step was to fulfill, which is shipping to the customer, and the last step is payment processing. All right. So this would be the traditional step that again, we're just creating for this customer. Now that we've set up the SOP, we are going to go ahead and run it for our customer. So we'll come into our customer, and then the customer that we created earlier, his name was Selvin. Right. So you come here, and then once you select the customer, he's made a request. Now we're going to run the workflow for that target customer. So you select customer orders workflow, and then you just click start order. And now everything that we define in that workflow is going to show up in the steps. So this is what your staff and your teams will be using to manage the stage of the request as it goes according to your workflow. So all they have to do is just look at the requirement, and then they pass it and they move to the next step. Sometimes they would process the request, but then it's stuck in a particular stage, or it has to pause on the stage, and they need to reassign it to a different user in the business. So they can reassign the workflow to different entities or different departments within your organization, and they process the request end to end. And then once they get to the next step, they will do the work and process it, and then it's done. So the system will keep track of the request as it flows through the stages, right, of the workflow. Sometimes there might be a need to order parts and labor or assemble inventory. So from that workflow, you can add inventory product. Let's say you have products inside your inventory. You can load up your product parts and specs inside the system, and then you can populate the order and associate it with this person wants this part or this labor or this service, and it's all going to be linked to that order request. As part of the process, you can also attach items. Sometimes there's a need to attach documents or approvals or communication related to the order. You can do that through the progress notes. You can add a level of details. You can also upload documents to that order. And then you can also export the items if you need. So the idea is that you'll run through the whole process, and once you run through it, everything should complete. And then once it's done, you're pretty much done with the order. So that's how you set up a workflow for the customer use case. And that's how you will basically build out your SOP for the different aspects of your business or your operation. And then you just bring it into the system, and then your teams will use this to manage your workflows end to end. So that's pretty much it for this demo. In the next piece, I will try to run through the asset piece of the solution, and then we can go into that a little bit more in detail. So thank you so much for your time today. You have a wonderful day. Cheers.